I'd like to call to order a meeting of the Board of Selectmen on Tuesday, November 1st, 2016. I'd like to open up by the Pledge of Allegiance. If you all could please stand. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I thought that was
Okay.
Tracy.
So let's start out with the approval of the minutes from October 11th, 2016. Do I have a motion?
Move that the Board of Selectmen approve the open session minutes of October 11th, 2016.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion from Mr. DiCarlo, second from Mrs. Medili. All those in favor?
Aye.
Oh, and before I move any further, let me just say, Selectman Watson could not be here tonight. She's feeling under the weather and not able to attend tonight. So we'll be moving forward with a four-person board and wishing her well and feel better soon.
Let's hope she's watching Chronicle. Starts.
Yeah, it's, oh, yeah.
We're on Chronicle tonight.
Well, if we tell
Hopefully
people
it's
that,
good.
they're all going to switch the station from us.
That's all right. It'll be more interesting on Chronicle, I'm sure.
This is going to be an interesting meeting. Okay, so next, under communication and announcements, our fabulous town clerk, Joyce Bradshaw, is going to give us an update on the election and the early election proceedings and so much going on.
As you can imagine, we have been extremely busy since we opened the doors on the 24th for the first time and started early voting. We just passed 5,000 ballots that have already been cast, and we still have till 8 o'clock tonight, all day Wednesday, Thursday, until noon on Friday.
And how many do we have altogether? 17?
We have 20,101 registered voters.
So
That's
almost
pretty
a
good.
quarter already.
Yes, and we have about 1,500 absentee ballots, so it's a good portion. It's at least around 25% so far. And I cannot tell you how wonderful all the people who have come in to check people in and out, and my staff. We have been nonstop since last Monday, and we're totally comfortable just getting all of these, because everybody gets a ballot, they get an envelope. Each and every one of these voters has to be entered into the voter registration system. So even if you have fast little fingers, it takes 1 to 2 minutes. So we have had extra people trying to help us just get all this information in, and then the weekend will mean sorting out the ballots and getting everything in alphabetical order, because we have large bins and they're already full. So the process of getting ready for Tuesday will be getting all these early voted ballots all sorted out with the proper lists, and we are doing central tabulation up at the high school, which means that we will be processing them through a central tabulation machine for all 8 precincts, because otherwise, looking at volumes like this, you would never be able to get them through the regular voting machines. Voting machines have all been tested. The ballots have been opened and inspected. The machines did very well. They've been service. So we have great confidence that Tuesday morning at 6 a.m. when we open, that everything will be in order.
I have a question for you. If
Yes.
someone pulled an absentee ballot, but they end up being in town, do they have to bring their absentee ballot?
We would prefer that they bring it, but if their vote hasn't already been cast as an absentee voter, they have the option of being able to vote in person. And then once they're on the list, and the warden is checking the absentee ballots, and when they get to that person, they would just write across the ballot voted in person. So you do have an option of going to the polls for absentee voting. Early voting, once you do it, you can't take it back or change it.
Yeah, that question's been coming up
Yes.
on the news.
Yep. And different states have different rules, but once it's cast, it's cast. Can't be taken back, changed, or anything else, so.
I've heard you've been really busy, so thank you and all the staff for their hard work on this. This has been long days for all of you.
Very long days, and Tuesday, as I said, the polls will open at 6 a.m. and close at 8 p.m. And all these early voted ballots will not be processed at all until Election Day. So we have great degree of confidence in how we're going to do the central tabulation. We feel really, other than the massive volume, we feel very comfortable about the process. And the state now is changing some of the regulations that they had in place because of the volume to allow people to maybe do central tabulation. We had designated it, and also we just got news that the extra grant that came from going over 20,000 will be sent to the town. So that was the magic number when we went over that. But and I can't say enough about the lovely people who live in the town of North Andover. Have been gracious. Thank you very much. Polite, pleasant, patient. We are very fortunate to have these people living in our town, and they've been absolutely fantastic. So,
That's great, thank you.
okay, thank you.
And I guess we would be remiss if we didn't mention that we are, for the first time in 10 months, back in our own meeting room, in our fabulous new town hall, or newly renovated town hall, I should say. Fantastic job by Ray and Andrew and the whole staff here, getting everything back and up and running again. I was here on Monday morning when the doors first opened with voting, and with everything going on, things were clicking already, and it was already up and running. And I guess we should say thank you to our members of the school committee here tonight for allowing us to use your room for those 10 months while we were displaced, but now it feels nice to be home.
It does
Rent-free, right. So,
And congratulations,
I'll send you a bill.
on time and on budget or under budget? Or we're not?
On budget.
There we go, okay. Okay.
so if you're
You
watching
just
at
spent
home
that
for...
extra penny, didn't you?
For all our viewers at home, if you're watching and you haven't got a chance to come down and vote yet, it's a great chance to come down and not only vote, but also take a walk around and see how Town Hall has been renovated, and all the services from town departments are all under one roof for the first time in over 30 years, from my understanding. So come on down and vote and take a walk around and check out the new Town Hall. I think you'll really love it. Okay, moving on. Government Finance Officers Association Distinguished Presentation Award.
Mr. Chairman, for the fifth consecutive year, the town has been awarded the Government Finance Officers Association Distinguished Budget Award. This goes to Lynn Savage and her team. It's a product that we implemented, a style that we implemented approximately 5 fiscal years ago, following a national standard that is widely recognized as the gold standard for budgeting. And for those folks at home, if you've ever looked at our budget, it's not simply numbers on a page. It really communicates to the community those goals and interests of both the board and ultimately the actions by town meeting. It is a policy document, a communication tool, and intended really to allow the reader, if you take the time to go through close to 200 pages, allows the reader the opportunity to understand what happens in each department, their goals and priorities, and the overarching interests of the community. So it's important that we maintain this designation. We submit it every year. There's typically some modifications to what's expected. It's actually reviewed by a review panel, and they grade us pluses and minuses on various aspects of that product. And again, great credit goes to the finance staff, certainly headed up by Lynn Savage. And we expect on an annual basis to submit this product to make sure we maintain the standard that we've achieved to this point.
Yeah, another great example. It's almost becoming like the New England Patriots, right? We expect this every year practically, and we shouldn't, because it's a lot of work, and I think it's a great...
But we don't inflate the budget though.
Oh, inflate the budget.
Don. Oh, that was bad. And I actually set you up for that. But again, congratulations to Lynn and the entire staff on once again, for the 5th consecutive year, winning this prestigious national award. I'm sorry, did I try?
Congratulations.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have this weekend coming up. It's a volunteer weekend, and we are looking for some help to clean up around the shore of Lake Kachikawick. Bruce, were you going to speak to this, or Andy, were you going to speak to this at all?
Bruce is here. It's great to hear.
I know.
I'm sure we'll be getting a robocall.
Especially for you.
First of all, are all the boats up?
Interesting you mentioned that. We have quite a reduction in boats. So I think that about 50% are gone, which is pretty amazing. So we're going to start looking at removing it.
When is that date? Because somebody did ask me that the other day. When is the date when you're
Supposed to be
physically
November
removing?
1st,
November 1st. So when are you going to start physically removing them?
probably in the next week or so.
Next week? Okay.
So, yeah, there was quite a
That's a communications and announcement. If you have a boat along the shores, best get it up.
time to get it out.
Yeah.
I guess there was quite according to the harbor master, there was quite a line of trucks, pickup trucks, picking them out this past weekend, so
Great.
it's good. This weekend is the second annual cleanup around the lake, kind of organized by the harbor master and DPW and planning and conservation. We have a lot of volunteers, and the reason it's this weekend is that we have about 40 or 50 volunteers from MAC Gives Back, which is Merrimack College, which that's the major labor force, and we kind of put it all around that. We have some, we're going to have the Center of Operations at Stevens Beach, and there's going to be 2 operations going on around there, each way around the lake. And then also, we're going to have an operation that starts over at the North Pumping Station and goes both directions from that, too. We're asking residents that live around the lake to clean up in front of their homes. Already got a call from a couple. One of them, you may remember, was chairman of the Finance Committee. In fact, I talked to him about that. So Alan Lebovich is going to be out there. And hopefully a number of his neighbors. What else? We're going to thank Mike Smolak for providing some of the refreshments. There's going to be donuts. If nothing else, it's worth it just to come and get the donuts. Yeah. So we're looking forward to it. Any volunteers will be great. 8 o'clock on Saturday morning. Nice warm day, I understand.
Do you have a rain date?
No, it's not going to rain.
gonna
It's
rain?
not just going to be cool. No rain date. No, not with Mac Gives Back. That's really the main. Questions?
Rain
Great.
jackets. Okay. Thank you, Bruce.
Yep.
Thank you very much. Okay. Next, we will review the meeting schedule for 2017.
So, Mr. Chairman, we had previously proposed a meeting schedule. We needed to make one change to that schedule. We had a end of November meeting date scheduled. It doesn't fit into our, the work we need to complete to move forward with you with the classification, the tax classification hearing. I know the board's favorite hearing annually, the tax classification hearing. So we could not get that completed by November 28th. It's a little too early. And the proposed or already approved December 19th meeting was too late in order to get the tax bills out. So we're proposing that date move to December 5th. Because it just gives us a sufficient amount of time to make sure that the assessor is prepared to make a recommendation to the board, and also sufficient time after it gets approved to submit it to the state to get the tax rate approved and get the tax bills up. So that's is that the single change we made on this one? Yep, that's the single change made from the existing schedule is
Okay.
getting rid of the
You moved it from
28th.
the end of November to December?
Yes,
Okay.
yep,
So it would have been the 28th, and instead it's the 5th.
correct.
Okay. Everybody okay with that? Any
Yeah.
comments? Okay.
Any word if that conflicts with Tracy? I know she has the obligations to her housing
I
authority.
think the 19th was the only conflict, and we couldn't
December
address
19th?
that. Yeah, because the
Well, we
holiday.
don't like that generally anyways, Mr. Manager. 'Cause
That's
it's
the
a-
week before, that's the,
before.
it's the week
6 days
before.
Christmas, so Sunday would be...
Well,
Christmas
the
on Sunday.
calendar week before, yeah. And we can do, I think when we looked up, originally, I think the 19th has been a conflict for a bit of time with Ms. Watson, and I think we had thrown out some alternatives, but those also presented some conflicts in the feedback we got from the board. I don't remember what those conflicts are. We can look at the 12th to do consecutive meetings. The other item that typically comes up at the end of the year is the renewal of the licenses, which, again, 19th is a little late on that, if there's some process. So we'll circulate out to see what the 12th looks like to the board.
I'll keep it light.
Yeah, I think generally, other than the classification and rules, if we can get to the December 5th meeting and sort of pack that up a little bit and get the annual license renewals done on the 5th, it may leave the 19th as a relatively light meeting anyway, picking up any of those that are anomalies or having to slip through the cracks late. There's also, that's a budget calendar date I think we're looking for. I think that's the date in which you will receive the, I think the capital plan on that. I'll have to look at the budget calendar as well to check. So we'll float out to see what the 12th looks like, but I think in the past, we got some feedback that was complicated for some members as well. So we'll see if there's some alteration. If not, we'll try to keep the 19th as light as possible.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. No vote needs to be taken on that, just information. Okay, next, we have a recognition that we'd like to go through. Is Christy, hi Christy. So tonight, we'd like to recognize Christy Hale. This year, Congressman Seth Moulton established the Peter Gomes Service Award for members of his 6th district to recognize folks who have given of themselves to the community. We've always said on this board that, you know, the community volunteers are really what makes this town run so well, and whether or not you are a member of an official board or committee, or you volunteer your time at large for different projects, it all really is very much appreciated and really helps us here in the town to make the town a great place to live, work, and play. So, Christie was nominated, and 29 other folks around the 6th congressional district were nominated, and of that, 6 were chosen as the finalists for that award. So tonight, we'd like to recognize Christie for being chosen into that finalist pool. I'll read just a brief summary from her nomination, from the person who nominated her. Christie Hale is the ultimate volunteer. When a job needs to be tackled, the first person asked in our community in North Andover is Christie, and she would never consider saying no. She brought back a school library that had been dormant for years. She volunteers every week at the public library. Christie has been on the executive board at her children's elementary school for many years. She volunteered with the collection of toys and children's clothing to benefit families in need. She gives of her time and expertise. She's not at events. When she's not at events, she is at home working tireless hours to boost websites, increase social media presence, and streamline procedures through technology and common sense. So, Christie, thank you very much for all you do for the town, and we're honored that you were recognized by Seth Moulton for his Peter Gomes Award. We have a certificate for you. I'd like to present to you. Certificate of appreciation presented to Christie Hale in recognition of your selection as a finalist for Congressman Seth Moulton's 1st annual Peter J. Gomes Citizenship Award. Your extraordinary contributions to the town of North Andover are greatly appreciated. On behalf of the town of North Andover, thank you for your hard work and dedication. Presented to the North Andover Board of Selectmen, November 1st, 2016.
Thank you very much.
And you're welcome to say a few words if you'd like. Yeah.
As I was saying to a friend the other day that I helped out at the last minute for something, it takes a village. So without this, I've got Amy, who helps me with food rescue right now, Stan, who helped us get the Education Foundation back up and going. Like, I would love to say, yeah, it's great, I've done all this, and I've spearheaded a lot, but if it weren't for so many people in town who support all these projects, and with the support of Jen Price and other people, we couldn't do all of the great stuff that we're allowed to do. So, thank you.
Christy, is that your family?
And yes.
Are we proud of Mom? Yeah.
Well, thank you, Christie, and we're proud of you for representing the town at that level. Thank you.
Great.
Okay, any other communications or announcements?
I have a couple. On Friday, we are having, for some of us who grew up in North Andover, we used to have dances at the Red Barn, which is now where the youth center is. So we are doing a barn dance. It's hosted by the North Andover Women's Club. The money that we raise from that will go to support community programs and victims assistance types programs for both police and fire. And it's open to the public. And it's great for the guys because you don't have to wear a shirt and tie or a jacket. You get to wear jeans because it's an old-fashioned barn dance. And there'll be raffle prizes, and the theme kind of is bandanas. We'll also be selling bandanas. So we hope that you come. It's $25 a ticket. There's appetizers. Great music. It's music from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and maybe a line dance or two. So it's not country western, is just a really fun night. So if you're from North Andover and a little nostalgic, you should come. And if you're newer to the town, just come and have fun. So it should be a great night. And I have some flyers here if anybody would like it.
Is there a website too?
No, there's a website, but we will be selling tickets at the door. But if you'd like to get tickets ahead of time, you certainly can call me, Rosemary Smedili. I am in the book, and we'll be sure to get those to you. So please come. One more thing, Veterans Day. Just reminding everybody that Veterans Day, November 11th, 11/11/11, and I don't remember what time the parade steps off, but it's usually
10:15.
10:15, and we hope you come out and show support of the veterans, and it's a nice event. Some great guest speakers, and we love seeing the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts, and of course, North Andover Marching Band and so forth. So if you got some time, please come and bring your family.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I just make a comment about the appreciation of the employees? I think for any of us who have moved personally in the past, you recognize the range of emotions for moving, both I won't list all of the emotions, but I've moved a couple of times in my life, and employees left this building 11 months ago, moved into a new space. They did so with very little complications, up and running without closing the building for any particular length of time. They lived in complicated space, quite frankly, for 10 or 11 months, meeting new members of the staff that they didn't work shoulder to shoulder with, but particularly crowded spaces in some cases. And then we moved back into this building, and we had folks who have been out of this building or never actually been employed in this building. It really was impressive to watch the transition back into the building. We made that Monday seamless. For some of us, the transition's a little easier, right? We spent less time out of the building. We have to move less. But for those folks who had a tremendous amount to move, the land use boards, the clerk's office, the others, hundreds of boxes of material had to move out of a space that they've been in, quite frankly, for more than a decade. The positive attitudes were great. The ability to deal with the public, to be proud of the building they moved into is probably got a little bit under-noticed. Not as a criticism to anybody who's been in the building. It's just something you just don't bring up. But someone who's been in another space for 10 years and then turns the key and shows up to a brand-new space, it's a little more difficult than it seems. And those folks have been great in terms of their transition, have been good in their feedback to tell us what they may need for changes, which is good. We certainly appreciate the feedback. And our IT staff, as an example, we went from out of business with no technology to fully operating when the day we showed up, and obviously transitioned into this space. So it's not something we probably spent enough time on, but I want to recognize the staff who moved, and in many ways moved themselves, a lot of their own boxes, because they wanted to. So I really want to recognize their efforts, because the building's beautiful, but it just wouldn't have happened as a transition without their cooperation, and I really do appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely, and thank you for recognizing that. And like I said, I came in Monday morning, shortly after the building opened for the first time, and all the IT facilities were working, which is phenomenal, because that's a huge piece. Everybody was, there were citizens at the counter getting their building permits, and people voting, and people paying bills, and it was like we had never left. So it was a phenomenal effort to get everybody up and running and going for it Monday morning, so thank you. Okay, anything else? Any other communications announcement?
Motion to go to license?
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to go to license. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're in licensing.
Here in licensing. And as if to underscore what was just most recently on the agenda, we have before us Jen Price and Christy Hale making a request on behalf of, let's get this right, the North Andover Foundation for Education. Now, this is the first big fundraiser of the
Yes.
season since school started.
Yes.
So we have before us a request for a one-day wine and malt license. The event is a fundraiser dinner to be held at Brightview, 1275 Turnpike Street on November 5th, between the hours of 6:30 p.m. and 10:30 p.m. It looks like everything is in order, and police, fire, and building have all weighed in. Would you like to speak at all to this event at all?
I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Any questions? You want to put that plug, or you can put a plug in for it?
I can
Sure,
totally
before we
plug
vote.
where's the best place.
Assuming we approve it, yeah, absolutely.
So one thing that Jen Price has brought from her former district is to basically do this dinner, where it's a specific fundraiser in order to help students who need financial aid to experience things outside of the classroom, different trips in the high school level. It has been wildly successful in Newton. We're starting out substantially smaller here in North Andover. But any of the funds that are raised will be directed specifically to any of these, I don't want to call them extracurricular trips, but trips abroad. There's a band trip that'll be done next spring. So students who can demonstrate need, we're hoping to have these funds available to help support these trips because they all get very pricey, and we don't want to see that kids can't go because of that. So the dinner is Saturday night. Tickets are $125 a piece. They're still available. It's supposed to be a wonderful evening. I will be there. The staff members from the high school, along with central office, will be the service staff. So if for no other reason you would like to be served your dinner by Greg Gilligan, please buy a ticket and come by.
That might be worth
Want
$250.
that.
They are also accepting sponsorship of tables or donations. If you go to the North Andover Foundation website, there's a link there to, it's called LYLEF, L-Y-L-E-F, the Live Your Learning Educational Experience Fund. I'm sorry, I know I'm getting the letters wrong. Anyway, there's a link to it. You can buy tickets and sponsor right at that website through PayPal. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion that the Board of Selectmen, acting as licensing commissioners, approve the one-day wine and malt license and fee waiver for the North Andover Foundation for Education fundraising dinner at Brightview on Saturday, November 5th, 2016, from 6:30 to 10:30 p.m.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Hearing none. It passes.
Motion to move out licensing, Mr. Chairman?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. We have licensing.
Mr. Chairman, can I respectfully request to move the new business ahead of the consent items unless you have some other preference to do that?
Why not?
No, I'm good with that.
Great.
I was going to suggest the same thing.
Excellent.
So let's move new business, and for new business, we have an update on the middle school athletic recreation complex. So we've got some very esteemed members of the town here, the police chief, the DPW director, Mr. Green, Mr. Holland. I think I'm here to speak to this. I think you're here for this, Chief.
If I could give a kickoff and an overview, and certainly as those folks come up. So 2 years ago, certainly for the 5 years I've been here, I've received both from the board and from other stakeholders in the community an interest to improve the space between the middle school and all the way through Hayes Stadium, that the feeling was it was an opportunity for improvements in that area, which could better serve the community in any multifaceted way. I think most of the feedback I initially received, and I think it makes perfect sense, is that it needs to be a multi-generational space, one that represents an opportunity for all members of our community to participate in some way. With that as a backdrop, I requested $50,000 from the Community Preservation Committee for the purpose of bringing on a consultant. And with that consultant and a working committee, the goal was over the last 18 months to throw some ideas on a page. So let me first say that the working committee, Rick Green, Terry Holland, Jim Mealy from the school department, Bruce Thibodeau and I have met on several different occasions for the purpose of first designing the scope, which ultimately led to these plans here, and then ultimately selecting a consultant. I sort of have to start from a point that, to be very clear and probably repeated multiple times, there's nothing that you will see on these plans and pages which represent a final project, or even, quite frankly, what could be close to a final project. The intention was to take every idea that we could think of and that our consultants had experience with and put them on a page, what turned out to be 2 pages, so that a successor group spending more time and energy on this project could have ideas that ultimately would lead to a final product. So anything that could be thought of or conceived, something that may exist in another community, as an example, everything from water features to community gardens to education space to walking tracks to basketball to so everything from, there's a bandstand in one of the proposals as a way to put a space that could bring the community together, keeping in mind both the impact or the synergy that could be created with the schools, which was ultimately important, implementing a little bit, or at least thinking about the prospect that we've thrown out, the idea of this sort of single kindergarten building, preserving an opportunity, we hope, to continue fireworks in the middle school space, a rigorous discussion about a dog park. Just sort of leave it at that. And so any possible idea that folks with more experience, certainly than I, could come up with have been thrown on two different plans with the intention, again, to begin a dialogue, not to end a dialogue, not to make choices today, but to begin a dialogue. So we selected a Waterfield design group who has extensive experience in this area and can probably identify some of the communities they worked with in the past to come up with a couple of ideas. After they come through and sort of give you an overview, I will again cut to the chase. I believe that the work of the working group and my job as it relates to this project is largely complete, that the role now would be for us to step back, for the selectmen to have a committee move forward. There's some suggestions about how to do that, because over the next anywhere from 18 months to 3 years, quite frankly, a working group needs to refine the proposal to represent what the community wants. In many of these projects, our role in government is not to tell people what they want, but to sort of kickstart a project, gain input, turn it over to a citizen committee, and ultimately find a way, if the community endorses it, to fund this project. I certainly believe, and I think the members of the committee believe, that this project can be transformative to the community. It can impact literally every generation in the community. Its location is ideal for so many things, community space. And it's such a large space, there's really some great opportunities. But with that, we expect that what we've done, the work we've done over the last 15 to 18 months, really is just intended to be the tip of the iceberg, a kickoff for the next steps. And I think some members of the committee are going to talk about that. So with that, I'll turn it over to a representative from Waterfield, who will talk a little bit about their thinking relative to these proposals. Unless Bruce wants to sort of give an overview.
I'll just introduce Craig, and I just wanted to reiterate what Andrew said about the, we went through a proposal process, and got some proposals in, reviewed them. We thought that Waterfields was outstanding, and not forgotten was that they did an outstanding job on McAvoy. And what I really liked what happened at McAvoy was not just the whole design process going through and their experience, but how they dealt with the stakeholders in helping me to go through, and the rest of the group to go through and talk with the residents as well as the people that would be using it. So he kind of balanced both sides of that. And we had extensive public meetings, bringing in input. We did the Survey Monkey, we did the robocalls, and we got a lot of input on that, and I think it came out good. So I want to introduce Greg Miller from Waterfield, and he'll go through the process here.
Bruce, can you just turn that mic toward, oh, he's going to do it, sorry. Good evening. I've got 11 by 17s. I think I've got 5 or 6. So this is, I wasn't prepared. I wasn't sure which technology was going to work today, the old-fashioned or the newfangled. So I brought paper as well, which will help as I walk you through some of this. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So what I'm showing on the first page is existing conditions, and so I wanted to use this as a baseline so that as I walk through the two different options, we'd have something to compare what we have today in terms of land area, the locations of things, access and circulation, including pedestrian access, and the relationship of the land area to be considered for this to the schools and to the neighborhood. So the first page here is all existing conditions. You can see where the existing football field is, where the track oval, the baseball field. Those are the dominant features of the property today. Parking's kind of on the perimeter. Middle school's off to the right here. And Route 125. Along here at the bottom of the page. So as Andrew said earlier, neither one of these is meant to be the magic bullet. In fact, what we're proposing, or what we're showing you here, is simply an arrangement of how to do one direction. A lot of times what we find with communities that we work with is that the final analysis of the final direction is a combination of these two, where we mix and match and take pieces out of option one and put it into option two, or vice versa. So let me flip over. So what you can you see in the middle of the diagram is a full-size baseball field, 90-foot diamond. baseball, and an 11v11 soccer field. This is the area right in the middle here. This is also proposed to be artificial turf and lit, so there would be lights around the perimeter of this field. The football field is in this area, the old football field, and that has lights or had lights. So we're moving that more toward the center. We've also, on this sketch, added parking around the perimeter. We've tried to add parking wherever parking already existed, because we know that in the development of a signature recreational asset like this, it'll be popular in a lot of different ways for a lot of different reasons. And so what we're trying to do is avoid creating one main area of parking and then forcing people to walk long distances. People will be using different portions of this facility for different reasons, and so we kind of favor the divide and conquer approach to parking. And so we've added, I think, on option one, close to 135 new spaces. And you can see those pockets of parking that we've added when it's compared to the existing areas. Front and center, kind of down at the middle, is a large playground for both 2 to 5 and 5 to 12 age group. Directly adjacent to that is a spray park, that kind of light blue area on the plan. Those are extremely popular. There's 2 orange squares, rectangles actually, on the plan, one over here and then one down here. These are restroom buildings, and one could have a snack capability in it. There's a lot of different reasons. I have to emphasize, too, this is conceptual design, so there are a lot of details that we don't have figured out yet, like how big is that building? We've shown it as a footprint size, but what actually happens in there, we're not there yet. But what we're comfortable saying is that there definitely needs to be restroom facilities, and the area, both option 1 and 2 are using 18 and 19 acres respectively, so only having one restroom facility would be a chore. So we tried to spread those out as equidistant as possible in terms of how it can service the greater area. So next to the spray park is that restroom building and potentially snack area. And then we've got tennis courts, 2 pickleball courts, and bocce. So that's, tennis courts are here, pickleball is here, and bocce is here. The number of these, it could be 3 tennis courts, it could be 1 tennis court, it could be more basketball courts, it could be more pickleball courts. The idea is that we've got an area dedicated in this area for hard court sport play. We can do a number of things, and as we develop the conceptual layout, we in fact worked extensively with the committee to try to figure out at this point in time what the proper mix of tennis, basketball, pickleball, and others. In fact, we shrank the footprint. Our previous iterations that you haven't seen had more of this, but the decision was made to have less at this particular location in favor of more green space. As I work my way clockwise around from where those sport courts are located, there's an exercise area for anybody, really. We've labeled it as seniors, but it can be anybody. There'll be exercise equipment there that anyone could use at any time. Not really suitable for children, but safe for children, and mostly focused on adults. There's also a half-a-mile walking trail, so hard to see, but there's a white dotted line that goes around the perimeter like this on these proposed walking trails, and that's a half-a-mile loop. So that's, again, kind of to support the fitness aspect of what we're trying to accomplish at the facility. We thought it'd be interesting, or an idea that came up through the committee was to add a performance stage area, so that little orange area right here, surrounded with some trees, is a lawn area with a performance pavilion. It could be a stage that's relatively flush, only 2 steps high, or it could be something that's a little bit higher, depending really on how many people you plan to host at a performance, a musical event, or that sort of thing. The stage, the definition of the stage is something we haven't really drilled down on yet, but the idea is we've reserved a spot for that to occur. And then the area, the big green area at the top of the page is, informal recreation, and we've drawn soccer pitches, if you will, soccer layouts, but that can be lacrosse, it could be anything. In fact, when you look at the size of the 11v11 full-size youth soccer, that could almost fit here if we wanted to accomplish more formal soccer capabilities. And all we have to do is maybe reconfigure how the walkways are laid out, and we'd have a second full-size soccer. But we've shown it in this way as informal
A lot of times before a game or a match is played, the teams need some queuing area or some practice areas just to prepare for the game. And so that is that area, and it's also open. So that's a big open field. That's not artificial turf, that's natural grass. And then as we swing back around, there's an outdoor classroom area right up here in this corner. We tried to locate this as close to the preschool as possible and as close to the elementary school area. So the focus of this area is to support educational activities. We've designed several outdoor classrooms for the City of Boston School Department, and they're a big hit because it gives kids something to do educationally outside besides play, and it gives the teachers a new mechanism to deliver an education or deliver an aspect of a lesson. So we thought that was an interesting spot for that. And then as we circle back around, it's really more parking over here, and then there are some existing trails that go through the woods. One cuts through here today, and the other one's over here. In fact, there's an existing trail like this, and we thought, well, why not connect that and create kind of a nature walk area here? And that's really more passive than anything else. And that brings us kind of to a conclusion on option one. We flirted with the idea of changing the access here on 125, but really didn't drill down too deep on that. We understand there's a traffic study would be needed and a lot more vetting with the community, and it really wasn't the focus of this effort at this point in time, but we left the door open to consider it or not consider it, leave it the same. We really didn't touch that with any great measure. So that's option one. We also, at the bottom of the page, or 125, a green area to try to improve the curb appeal, if you will, the awareness, the identity of this significant signature recreation facility. So we're trying to improve the front door of the facility. So option two, you'll notice option two has more of a linear layout. Option one, we tried to put some curves in there and let it feel a little bit more designy, if that's even a word. But option two, the footprint of option two is increased by almost an acre. And the way we do that, you're familiar with the slope that goes from 125 down into the existing area. Well, so the way we've increased the footprint here is by pushing the parking or adding more parking down in this area and then pulling some of the recreational focus down towards 125 as well. A lot of communities in Massachusetts are growing. You know, growth happens, it doesn't stop. And the ability to add recreational space sometimes does stop because land just doesn't become available. So in this case, you're making better use of existing land. And it will cost a little bit more because we'll have to work with potentially some short retaining walls or be creative with the grading in order to make that work. But it does expand your usable footprint quite a bit. It allows us to get more programming into the field. In fact, in this layout, everything that we have is bigger. So you'll notice that we still have the full-size soccer and baseball, but we've added that full-size soccer over here in the Great Lawn area, and then softball as well. So this area is bigger. This is about the same size, but everything around it has gotten bigger. So more parking, and each of the supporting elements of recreation and play are also bigger. The key difference between option 1 and 2, besides what I just mentioned, is this more of a focus in. We've got a pavilion here. We still have the outdoor performance area up in the top of the page, but we've got this kind of central focal point at the beginning. The beginning is relative, I suppose, but we see the facility being oriented along this axis, and this pavilion is kind of a nice central organizing feature, a gathering point, if you will, especially given the family aspect of these uses down in this area. All of these are geared towards families, and that's just a nice place to gather and collect, be together. So bocce is here. We've got the exercise area as well for the fitness, the playground for the 2 different age groups. The age groups are separated and slightly larger in this case. The spray park is slightly larger. And then here we've added a kind of a street hockey rink that could maybe be iced over in the wintertime or not, depending on how the temperatures cooperate and how that works with DPW, but that's an option. And in our hockey-centric part of the country, we found that that's popular with a lot of different communities, to continue to generate that informal hockey activity. The other significant difference with option 2 is that we've added around that, or in between the parking area and the main athletic fields, is just an open park area. So this is, we haven't really designed this much, but we show trees and organization to the space. And so this is just a focal feature that just happens to be nicely located next to the pavilion, if the pavilion continues. And then the other big difference, while we don't show the outdoor classroom, the outdoor classroom could continue in option 2, but we do show a significant community garden area. So again, as Andrew had mentioned, neither one of these is are we trying to sell. We're trying to show how big options or elements may need to be in order to fit and be supported and have access in the overall big picture. So if you like community gardens, this is how big the community gardens might be, and we can steal a little bit from that to add in the outdoor classroom if that's something that people like. So I think the number of parking spaces that we're adding, I'm just going to do a quick tally, 60, 120. Yeah, we're adding, almost 220 new parking spaces. Oh, 250. It's a significant increase in parking. And with these types of facilities, when they're operating at the same time, sometimes you can never have enough parking. And that's the whole idea. You want this to be a signature facility. You want it to be one of your highly utilized facilities. In fact, because we've got these competing uses, this is really a place where you can intentionally let the community bump into each other. You want that. It generates goodwill because people of like minds are going to be seeing each other all in one place for informal and formal recreation. And so in terms of cost, well, I guess before I go to cost, any questions on the two layouts?
About 3 million?
3 million? Close.
This is pretty amazing.
Anyway, just so for those folks, for both the board and the folks at home, the best way to look at these plans is if you took each of the labels, right, and you put them in a list of bullet points, that represents all of the possible options. How the community ultimately chooses to mix and match those is a function of what the community believes it'll use and cost. So again, these provide frameworks. Just because something's on one plan and not on the other doesn't mean you can't have features from both. It's again attempted to give you a context and scale. So if you took every feature, everything from community garden to outdoor education space to bocce to a pavilion to a water feature and you listed all those represent all of the possible features you could have. It'll be up to the community to decide which combination of features it has an interest in. And as you can imagine, it's not, and as was identified, we're not, that's really for a later phase. A significant part of this is entrance and egress off of 125, entrance and egress off the school buildings to make sure we have the proper way to do that, drop-offs in the morning and afternoon, dealing with all of that, and any topographical changes that need to be made to make sure that we can sort of lay this all out. That's all sort of in the detail sometime off. The goal now is to really create a sort of a mental list of the possible uses. And as you can see from that list, it really is multi-generational. People walking a half-mile track, going to a senior workout area, young people doing an outdoor classroom, ball teams playing on ball fields. All of those things are possible. It's just a matter of the community embracing which aspects they're interested in and then coming to grips with how best to implement that and fund it, quite frankly. What will be identified is that if you get every bell and whistle and you do it all at once, you've got a construction cost about $8 million before contingency. This is a very large space, and so part of the work of any future committee is to put all those things in a page, understand methods by which they would fund that, and whether or not it would need to be phased, or whether the community's appetite is, geez, we want the $5 million product versus the $8 million product, or how we go forward with making sure that if we want it all, how that would work through CPC funds, alternative grant funding, the capital plan, and if we do that, the method to do that, do we need to do that in phases to get what we want? How would the phasing work and those kind of things? So this is a big ticket item because it is a 18 to 20 acre reinvestment on a space that is truly transformative to the community. And we should say that right up front, and then as a community recognize that we choose, you choose, the community chooses what it wants from the asset. That's ultimately, steps that have yet to take, and they're some distance off, quite frankly.
And an important addition to what Andrew said is that you've got to start somewhere, and so these different elements all require support: parking, access, circulation. And so what we've done is simply begin the process. If you want a list of these items, here's how much space they occupy, here's how much space needs to go into supporting those elements, primarily parking and access, but there's a whole host of other things. And then the relationships of these different main elements, especially when we get down to the actual design of playgrounds. Parents want to know that they can keep an eye on their 2-year-old and their 10-year-old at the same time. And so the adjacencies of these different uses are important, and the relationship of all of these different elements to the perimeter elements that are also public use, and private use for that matter, the neighborhoods, and access through the neighborhoods, access to the schools. So it's a complicated process. It starts with the list continues and gets modified. We show you how the list manifests itself on the available land, the topography, the grades, the drainage, all that stuff, and we come out the other side with a sketch like this that then gets pulled and pushed and tugged again. So it's, there's a lot of different ways to get to the end result, and it all depends on the kind of input that we get from you.
The first question I have is buffer zones to the neighbors. It appears as though you've kept, I might be reading it wrong, pretty much the same buffer zones that are already have been in place, except maybe one spot.
Yeah, we've tried to stay as loyal to the existing use footprint
Yeah.
as possible, knowing that there are some areas where we could cheat a little bit and take a little bit more real estate for development. So for example, this area up in here currently is open. Now, there's a baseball field up here today. But there's a lot of open space in between that when you look on the existing conditions plan. But parking, this is parking and parking today, parking tomorrow. Same thing down here, parking today, parking tomorrow. So we've come very close to staying within the existing use footprint to try to respect those.
Yeah, it would be disappointing, I'm sure, to some neighbors that all of a sudden they've had trees, they looked out at trees, and now they're looking out over whatever gets chosen. So it appears as though you've kept most of that in place. That would be my concern.
It looks like layout 2 thins that out a little bit because it's got more recreation space, so it kind of pushes that.
Well, those
Into
woods, the woods facing the front door to the right, those have always been used for
Right.
a little bit of hiking, outdoor classrooms for years.
Right.
But that appears to be, but it's a little wet, so, which is fine. They
Right.
can trample around and look at,
These are some of the details, even the wet aspect of that area has to be reconciled in a subsequent design phase. We've shown it as a possible option because in walking through there, we think that it has the potential to be used for that, but we haven't gone through and done a wetlands flagging or
it's
anything like
pretty
that.
wet.
And then to the point about the buffer, we show a lot of proposed trees, these green clouds, right? Are proposed trees, but even still, we could double or triple the number of trees. And in fact, we could be very strategic about where we put trees based on the buffer needs of people who abut this, who come to us and say, today it's not like this, and I'm okay with it, but I need a little help. And that's where the tugging gets at. We've got some flexibility here with how we move the different pieces around.
Did you open up any more gates or anything? One looked like a walkway. Did you
In terms
open
of gates to the outside world, you mean?
to the use or to the neighborhood?
Well, we're keeping, the beacon. That's, right now you come in through Phillip Brooks or through Bay State and then drive exiting left and right. So that's being maintained. All the existing access is being maintained, and we haven't really added any new.
Okay, because that's, I think, all of a sudden, again, trying to be sensitive to the neighbors, that what used to be private area is now going to be a walk-through or a drive-through.
Yeah, we haven't changed any of those. The only places where we've considered it is really how we relate to 125, and even that, we haven't even scratched the surface on that.
Okay, I have another question. What's a spray park? That sounds scary to me.
Oh, spray parks are wildly popular, and every community that we design and build them, they are a huge hit. These are, for the most part, well, they could be concrete surfaces or rubber surfaces, and then there's spray water features.
Oh,
And so it's like a
okay.
It's like a sprinkler on steroids, and there's 5 or 6 different elements, and kids go running through. It's typically 2 to 5, but even older kids, when it's a hot day, will have fun with it.
Okay, is it sensitive to putting in some dish soap, like used to happen over in South Lawrence? And it used to
Some
go
bubbles?
like-
Well, Lawrence has one, and Methuen has two right now.
No, there used to be one on 114, and it didn't stay open very much.
There was a fountain.
They put soap in it.
No, they have spray parks now in those communities,
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
of the state grant, right?
You missed, it was, you missed.
I know the joke, but I'm saying that there are,
No,
if you
it
want
was
to see
for
how they
real.
actually look, there are ones operating in the
Yeah.
Merrimack Valley
Absolutely.
right now.
Yeah, they're very popular.
Yeah.
And then the new equipment today is not what we all remember from back in the day. It's really cool stuff. It's a big hit with families, and especially the kids.
I envisioned spray cans for the kids who
Yeah,
like
yeah.
to do. I think, no, that's just not going to work. We're trying to catch the guy.
Yeah, and I-
It's silly string
I'm the mother
bylaw.
of 3 boys. I can think of these things.
After having spent all the hours your entire group has
Yeah.
over the past year and a half, are there obstacles that you see now that you've jumped into this project that you didn't anticipate running into? Whether it's been, community feedback, what they want to see, maybe what they don't want to see there, as you try to find a way to use this space? I mean,
No real obstacles. Really, the toughest part is trying to decide what makes the final cut. And that's really not our decision. We advise on what can work, and so really it's kind of the toughest part is figuring out what to finally pick.
what to pick.
Yeah.
How do you see this, Mr. Town Manager, impacting any potential expansion of the schools that abut this property, whether it's Atkinson or the Early Ed Center?
Yeah, it's why, first of all, it should be known, Jim Mealy sat on the meetings for a year and a half. Obviously, Jen Price has been involved in discussions. The one active conversation we're having is whether or not a kindergarten building will be attached to or situated near the early childhood center. We have, as part of Facility Master Plan 2, we'll be looking at some elementary school improvements. Eventually, it's not as if I have any real details, but most of those aren't space-related. They're really improvement, inter-building improvement related. I think what you see here doesn't constrain that. The middle school, has, I think in the long term, we're going to have to address the possibility of middle school space, and it could be everything from, again, I'm throwing up things that have been thrown out there rather than specifics, because there are no specifics, whether or not, you deal with the courtyard or other spaces from a space perspective. But none of those should be impacted by this. I think ultimately what this does, one of the biggest impacts here, is making sure we create the proper circulation, so we improve actually the circulation. For instance, you go around the middle school today, that's not exactly a pleasure. And then you take a hard right up a steep hill to get onto 125. Hopefully you do take the right turn and not the left onto 125, but I know we know some people don't do that. So I see this is one of the pieces that's sort of missed in this. I see this as an opportunity to improve, quite frankly, to connect the educational spaces and improve the flow and activity of the elementary school. And so I think all of that will be considered, because we'll give ourselves a little more time to understand what may be happening. But my conversations with the schools and the inclusion of Jim Mealy has incorporated those kinds of concepts. I just think we're going to end up spending a fair amount of time trying to understand parking and flow of cars and how that impacts these spaces. Because in the morning, it's complicated, and we want to be sensitive. Duly noted is what I'm thinking about it. There was a hearing the other night that Mass DOT is planning on a pretty significant improvement to the Chickering at Mass Ave lights, including the installation of sidewalks going down 125 heading toward Main Street, and also on the school side. This is fast becoming the center, from an activity perspective, the center of the town. Meaning school administration, amount of vehicles. We created this remarkable pedestrian access now off the middle school through a Safe Routes project. We're going to see this Mass DOT invest heavily, several $1 million, into improve the walkability around Mass Ave, some connectivity back to the town common. And so all of those things need to be incorporated in some way, because we want to create a space that's a destination and use a few less of these parking spots, because it'd be really neat if we could connect those dots to walkability from the schools and from other resources we have. So those will all be considered as part of further design aspects of this, but we're comfortable we can incorporate the school's interest into this.
You know, because of the input we got from Jim, when we looked at the school circulation, we've added more parking spaces to take some of the pressure off of what happens at the elementary, and that allows us to have a much longer queuing area for drop-off. So, and by putting a little bit more width there, you know, because we're rethinking the use of the entire land area, it allows us to be a little bit more generous with the width of that area, which makes everybody feel more at ease with that sensitive time when everyone's trying to get to the same place at the same time to drop and run. So it does allow us to take some of those important queuing and access and parking into consideration. Any other questions?
So before I sort of lay out a very, very 30,000-foot timeline, I think it'd be helpful to hear from the citizen members of our working group. I think by the way, their input has been, I learned a lot. They were nothing like working group meetings. We were candid and robust in our conversation about certain things, which is great. And I can tell you it was a pleasure serving with these two gentlemen. Their input and their understanding of the community and what the opportunities were here are very much appreciated. So I'm sure they have some value to add to the conversation.
Well, one of the things Rosemary brought up was the neighbors, and we were thinking about that. That's kind of why we switched the fields that would have the most attendance and the bigger crowds and the lights, and took them away from the houses and put them near the school, so that we would have less of an impact on the neighborhood with that. That was one of the things we looked at. But of course, right now, what we were just trying to do is lay out options and give people something to start with, so that, and then when we meet with the neighborhoods, and we want to meet with the elderly, we want to meet with a group of people who are going to keep Mr. Hayes's memory in mind when we make this change. We have a whole list of people we want to meet with and get their input and their opinion. It's not one meeting; it's going to be several meetings, because every design is a new experience. So. It's been terrific working with these guys, so it's good.
I know we always hear good things about all of you, so it's a good sign. Thank you. So what we're doing now, we're changing our emphasis from what used to be a track in a football field. That emphasis will now be at our existing high school, and we're reusing that space. Do we see a void there with losing that track?
We do have the walking trails, which will kind of make up for that, we hope.
Okay.
So there is the ability to get plenty of exercise within that facility itself.
But the track up there isn't used anymore for...
It really isn't. I know
The
that
track is in disrepair.
for a long
It
time,
really
it's been in
isn't used
disrepair
much
now, I know that.
And we're hoping the walking trail, lit slightly, just so it's safe, that we could use it this time of year when it gets dark early and the common fills up and you can only get so many people walking in a circle. This will be a...
If everybody
a
walks in the
nice
same
alternative.
direction, you're okay. If you walk against that. You know, one of the things that Terry brings up, which is interesting here, with all the great open space we don't have a trail system like some communities have. And if you've been in a community with a trail system, the really neat thing is you can walk, I mean trails meaning forested trails, primarily flat paved trails. I don't mean our own trail, a robust trail, but a lot of folks have these sort of flat trail surfaces, because for some, getting on Wire Hill or getting on some of these spaces just doesn't make sense for any number of reasons. One is they may have the kids with them. They from an exercise perspective, the flat trail makes sense. You could really envision in some combination of these uses that in any one weekend you have a truly multi-generational space. And I would say it's what with all the great things in the community and all the great events that are multi-generational, we don't have a multi-generational space, a place where seniors are next to kids and next to families. And that is if you've ever been to those spaces in other communities, they are the best, because there's nothing better than watching the generations interact. And we may do that sort of one-off program at a time, but this provides the opportunity that you could imagine in any of these scenarios where there'll be folks walking around a track, working on a community garden, being in some kind of pavilion where there's a jazz band playing, watching some ball games at the same time, All of those activities happening in this community simultaneously it's just remarkably exciting, quite frankly, in terms of the opportunity it presents.
Can you give us some towns that have something like this near driving distance?
I know Wilmington is working on trying to build one.
But they don't have it yet?
They don't have it yet.
Okay.
No, there aren't many that have as much as what's here. It's usually a third of this, and they do everything else in other locations. It becomes a divide and conquer. Having 20 acres in a central location of your town is a little rare. And being able to have the flexibility, because you've programmed the other uses like football and track elsewhere, to now truly reinvent the space is also a rare option. As I said earlier, most communities are struggling so much with the growth, right? The growth has happened over the last 20, 30, 40 years or more, and the open space hasn't grown with it. So you have more people, more development, more kids, and you're still limited. And so to be able to get more out of each square foot of your recreational space like this is unique.
You know what I foresee, this to the school committee, that these schools will be the most popular schools in town. That they'll be, everybody will, yeah.
There are a
Yeah.
couple of ball field only examples if you want to take a look. Linfield just did a rehab of a space behind the high school, probably a third of the size, all ball fields. It's extraordinary. There are soccer games going on, football games going on, baseball. It's almost all sports related, but it's a remarkable attraction, and you see a lot of community activity off that program. Bedford has their traditional space behind Town Hall is a very wide open space with multiple uses. It's a very large space. It doesn't have this sort of all these features, but there's a skate park in that as well. And again, if you've been at sporting events and been to that space, what you see is people occupying all of the various spaces, and it's a really neat sort of interaction. So in many ways, the combination of the resources here provides a unique opportunity for this community, for our community, and I think that's what makes it even that much more exciting.
You know me, I'm always thinking, as this whole board is, and yourself and everybody else, it's actually kind of a boom for economic development in the downtown area. They're having a fun time at the park, and then they're going out to dinner at the Mills or downtown or going to CVS or whatever. I mean, it's just bringing more people. Believe it or not, there are some people, and it always amazes me a little bit, who live in this town, have lived in this town a long time, and have never, ever been to our downtown, which is shocking. Like, you've never gone to the post office, and they mean it. They've never been down there.
Great, how about in Arlington on 2/8? I think it's called McClellan, was done 2-3 years ago.
Yeah,
Is that something that has a lot of these features?
Yeah, Arlington also is trying to do it with Robbins Farm Park, but it still won't have as many elements as this. So it's unusual to have this many. You've got a lot of different elements here because, quite frankly, you've got the space.
Mr. Town Manager, it looks like when you brought this group here today, that you wanted us to consider the next steps.
Yes.
And so the request was that we consider creating a working committee to now take this to the next level.
Yes.
That this Board of Selectmen. I mean, I'm prepared certainly to make a motion. I don't know if there's any input that this working group would like to have before we consider it.
Just add to that, and there's certainly,
Right, yep.
so what I have recommended is exactly that, a working committee take over, a committee, we won't call it a working committee, but next step committee, whatever you want to call them, so that the working folks, the folks that are the staff people, Jim, myself, and Bruce, will always be here to support the project, but it's now a community project. And so the role of the staff, Bruce and I and Jim, is done in terms of getting, that's really needs to become, because it's such a large project, that there be a next phase committee proposed. I certainly, if the gentlemen here have an interest, I strongly recommend they be included. They represent broad interests in the community. They have great insights to be added, and that you have a committee of, say, 5. I would also suggest that a liaison from this board and the school committee also makes sense to work with that group. So that would get input from the school committee, a constant reaction from the school committee as well as the board. It's that big a project in the town. It's that important, quite frankly, to the community, that I think that structure, something like that, would be would be what I'd recommend. And what you'd expect as the next phase from this group is to get far enough along to ask for additional funding for the CPC to start to work toward design development drawings. And I would expect that that funding will come directly as a request to the Community Preservation Committee.
What's the timeline? How long do we think that this would really take?
A long time.
Yeah, I guess
That's what I'm
it depends if we do it in phases, or how we, be
I think
phased.
so.
Yeah.
Amount of the project, the estimated amount of the project.
It depends too on how much public input. I mean, you could have a very robust public process and it could take 6-8 months. Phasing the design and construction for something like this would be a year plus. One whole season and then maybe some into the next.
So even when you think of how we expend our funds, you know, from town meeting to town meeting, so you would need a design,
Yeah.
and then so you need money for that, and then you'd have to approve the design, and then it would be, so you're probably talking, what, a minimum of 3 years?
Yep. You'd have a committee begin to do some work. That committee would go back with a CPC request so that we'd add additional dollars to help with the design, and that committee continue a process. So you'd start to gain public information, you'd submit an additional CPC request in the calendar 2017 process. I did add to the scope of the consultant to work with that committee to, again, take more community input and start to finalize that in the form of plans, and then try to identify what the funding would be, probably as part of the calendar/fiscal 18 process, with, say, phase 1 of a construction being, you know, like fiscal 19, something like that. I mean, that's a general layout, and maybe you can get it done in 2 phases, depending on the nature of the funding. There's,
2020.
yep, somewhere in that range. And that's a general layout for you.
I'm excited to take that next step. I do know, just from the 2 school committee members here nodding along with your statement, as well as Chairman Teresi had contacted me and said that, you know, they all appear to have a strong interest in being involved, and I think it makes sense when you look at exactly what piece of property we're talking about. And so I'd like to move that we take this to the next step and establish and appoint a 5-member committee to include, in addition to 5 members, 5 full members, a liaison from the school committee to be appointed by their membership, and a liaison from the Board of Selectmen. Again, those 2 liaisons to serve as 2 non-voting members to bring this project to the next level. I mean, I certainly have an idea of 2 people I'd like to appoint, but perhaps we should make that motion separately. But yes, so, motion.
So there is a motion on the table to establish a 5-member committee, and then in addition to the 5-member committee, a member from the Board of Selectmen and a member from the school committee as liaison. That's your motion?
A member or an appoint,
Or
designee.
a designee, okay.
From either of those boards.
Okay.
From both of those boards, excuse me.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
A second, discussion on that? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so we have established that. Do we want to go to the next level and actually recommend?
Mr. Chairman, I think that perhaps we may want to consider, I'll let someone else make that motion, but at least I'd motion that we appoint Rick Green and Terry Holland to serve as 2 of those members of this newly formed committee.
I'll second that if they're willing.
Sounds like.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and
And perhaps from there, we can put it out to the community to see if there's any other interested parties that maybe weren't aware, but may want to help and support the efforts. Yeah.
So how would you like to proceed? I know that the 2 gentlemen had spoken to some folks who may have an interest in the group. How would you like to proceed as it relates to filling the balance of the 3 spots?
there were 3 additional members, 3 additional recommendations for members of that committee. Deborah Foley, who is a teacher at the middle school and has an arts background, Derek Wessel, who is a financial analytical background and involved in sports programs, and Todd Dow, who was a contractor and also involved in sports programs. So that was a recommendation from the working committee to move forward with additional members of that 5-member board.
I would have suggested someone from the neighborhood, but, you know, Terry, you're from the neighborhood now.
Yeah, so we're going to involve, we're going to have several meetings with everybody from the neighborhood, so the entire neighborhood is going to get to say quite a bit. You know.
I'd seen Debbie Brafali get drafted in without her consent to boards, and I know she serves anyways, so even if she didn't get permission, so.
We've reached out to those people we recommended.
Yeah, she's
I can
she's
tell you a
good.
little bit more about Derek and Todd if that helps you, or eases your mind in any way. Derek serves on the Fields Committee with Terry and myself. He's been involved with NASA for quite a long time, and he's pretty much in charge of their field maintenance, so he's very familiar with the sports programs. His children are also involved with other sports in town. And, just over, general involvement with the community, he attended some of the rail trail meetings for that area before this really started to come to fruition. So we thought he was a very good selection for this committee. Todd Dow is a contractor. His company does a lot of excavation, road work, utilities and infrastructure work, so he would be an asset to me in terms of the development of just that portion of the project, as well as a peer review of plans and specifications that would be developed for the project. So we thought he would be a good selection for the committee. And Terry knows Deb more than I do, so he could probably say a few words for her if there's any need to do
I think
that.
everybody knows Deb, anybody
Yeah.
who's been involved.
Everybody knows that.
She's done so much for so many different things, and the best part about her is she doesn't focus on one activity. That's what we were looking for everybody in this group. It's people who could see everything, from the arts to the sports, to the green space, to the kids and to the elderly. We don't want anybody focusing on one thing. We wanted everybody who was going to be interested in everybody. So that's why Deb seemed to be the perfect choice.
I think Terry and I have already gone through the process with Craig, Bruce on the McAvoy project, so we tried to involve the community as much as we could in that project. And I don't think there'll be any issues with getting the input of all the different groups, various sports groups, arts, and other groups in town, so that we can take everything and input it. As Craig said, this is just what he's presented in the conceptual layouts is just a framework. That's just the beginning, and it's going to be refined. It's probably going to be a combination of both some items from conceptual design 1 and 2 together. So again, what you see in front of you tonight is just the beginning, and we will take and consider the input of the community, because this, as everybody has said, this will be a main feature of the community. It's right on 125. It'll be a key to the town, so we want to make sure that we do it right.
Ultimately, whatever we propose is in your hands.
But I think the two gentlemen have identified a, really well-rounded group, and I'd strongly recommend, so they can begin work, that you appoint those folks, and so whatever it's worth, not knowing the individual specifically, it sounds like from what I've seen in the package and their communication, they would be. So it'll be a 5 committee, and then probably the next step would be to ask which one of you folks has an interest to be liaison, and then communicate with the school committee for having to have them identify a liaison. So sort of 5 regular members with 2 representatives, 1 from the school committee and 1 from the Board of Selectmen.
I would be happy to serve on that committee if the board is so interested.
Motion to appoint Selectman Spadili to the new working steering committee. Steering committee. Do we have to use the official name? Have we given it?
Selectmen liaison.
Liaison, yep.
As the board liaison, the non-vote, I guess, correct?
So
Non-vote
we have a
liaison.
motion, and I believe I heard a second over there. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, you're on. And you're also a neighborhood representative.
And I'm
as
also
well.
a neighborhood representative. So.
And then, do we also have a motion then to appoint the other 3 recommended individuals, Deb, Derek, and Todd, as recommended by the board, or the 2 gentlemen above, or I'll say the working committee? Do we have to take them individually, or?
I'm motion to approve the 3 individuals, Deborah Falley, Derek Wessel, and Todd Dow. I trust that, you picked the team that will help you see this vision come to fruition, so.
It's very exciting. Okay, any discussion on that? We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So we have that board established, with the exception of the school committee, which I'm assuming you'll take up at a meeting in the near future to appoint.
Great, that'd be great. Well, we, on behalf of the 5 of us, of which Jim isn't here, we very much appreciate the support. It's been great working with these gentlemen. We remain in support of the group. They know where to find us if there's a problem, but we very much appreciate it. I'm excited about what the future holds for the space and for the community, and look forward to the opening.
Yeah, and thank you for all your work. I know it's been a long road to get to this point, but it really is a phenomenal vision, and when it comes to fruition, it will be a very huge element of pride for this town and a real centerpiece for the town and the community, so real exciting.
Once again, just like the youth center, I think we're going to be on the front end of what everybody else is going to be looking for.
Yeah. Right, just like the youth center, we were trailblazers for that.
It's great.
All right, well, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's move on to consent items. First on the list, I guess, Bruce, you're going to be up again? Busy night for you tonight, huh? For truck exclusion permit for Green Street, and we started discussing this at our last meeting, but I think we're getting a little more information on this now.
The good point is I remember to stay around for the question.
Yeah, that's it.
There were a number of, well, let me start at the beginning. As we went through the process, and I think it's an outstanding project. It's finishing up this week. It looks great, and it's working very well. The contractor did a great job. The two representatives from Mass DOT, I've been involved in a lot of projects like this, and I tell you, this was the smoothest. They took care of the residents down there, any concerns, and it was very well, the process went very well. And as we looked at this, we saw a couple of things that were going to happen. There's the larger trucks, and there's larger trucks that access through Green Street. Rosemary probably knows better than anybody, down to the mills. They go across Main, down Elm, and down there. And they're large. We're talking about large trucks. We're talking about the tractor trailers and the 10-wheelers and so forth. And what's happening now and again, this is a Safe Routes to School project. So that's why, things are a little narrower. That's why there's the stop signs and so forth and the crosswalks. And what we want to do is make it safe for the kids going to school. So what's happening is, as these trucks come down, they try to make the turn from Green Street onto Green Street, and they can't make that turn if they're too large. Or if they miss that, and they go down, now they're at the school, now they're going through Faulkner. So you're directing them through the traffic. This won't impact FedEx, school buses, the FedEx, U-Haul, trash, maintenance vehicles for the street. That's not what we're looking at. And so we went down there. We went down there with police. They support this, and so we've asked the engineers to put together a permit for to be submitted. It's a draft permit. It was included in your package, and that's sort of where we are. Right?
The only thing you're trying to keep out of there is trailer trucks, right?
Pretty much.
Unless it's
Trailer trucks, and then a big
Yeah.
10-wheeler, the big
Yeah.
10-wheeler construction.
They wouldn't fit, no.
Yeah, and they did see those start to go
Big
down
dump
there.
trucks, yeah,
So what would,
In the alternate, I'm sorry, one last thing, in the alternate route, as you see in there, is to go down Mass Avenue, down to 25.
so is there a process if somebody was, say, moving into the area, moving out? Do they have to get something from the police department, or just everyone sees it and accepts it for what it is?
Yeah, pretty much that's
What
it.
I just, the latter of what I
Yeah.
said, okay.
And more of the enforcement will be on the larger trucks going down.
So when this was first proposed, if you look at the map, you can see that even though the green line identifies the alternate route, if you look at the block that says Mifflin, which is right next to that Green Street entrance, is there any way to predict what the impact may be on Mifflin as opposed to...
I think at this stage, one of the things with Mifflin, it doesn't kind of continue, so that's why it sort of dead ends up at Middlesex. I know then you
It
got to take a
does.
right, unlike
does.
what Salem, Green Street did was kind of...
It's more Middlesex, I
What they're
would think.
doing
Yeah.
now, they're taking the right to library, hitting Mifflin rather than going that road.
Yeah, we can...
Yeah, so I just don't want to see, because Mifflin actually is a single straight shot. And I would think if I were driving a larger truck, Mifflin would be more appealing to be driving up anyways right now instead of Green. So I'm glad that we're doing this and we're submitting it. I just want to make sure that we're not... I mean, it's possible we may end up being here, I guess, 2 months from now, having to talk about Mifflin.
Possible.
I don't know if that was observed at all, perhaps, Chief, that maybe
But
trucks are already
Mifflin
using
doesn't
Mifflin.
go
Mifflin's
straight
wide
through,
enough.
though. It doesn't go straight through to Main Street, it takes a right.
Mifflin, you take straight up, you take a right, and you drive, I mean, about approximately 100 yards to hit Main Street. It still seems like it would, if you have trucks that are already using Green Street, which I think would be the most cumbersome route to take, given
Actually,
the
there's really not
reconfiguration.
that many, honestly, and I
It's
know
the
it.
turns. That's what we're more concerned with, it not making the wide turn, as the chief said.
As
And
opposed
then
to the
getting down
traffic,
into
so.
and if they don't, then they're now dead-ended at the school, and now you're going through the neighborhood.
Do we see MassDOT, let's say that the unintended consequence is that Mifflin has increased truck traffic, would MassDOT, would we then be able to go to MassDOT several months down the road and request a similar exclusion for that site, or would they penalize us because we're kind of creating that?
I'm not going to begin to understand what they're going to do, so, no, we could go, but I don't know what the outcome would be. So.
I think, the project has really shaped up, and it's been an asset, but I have to say, and this is not going to surprise anybody in this room, the signage is just a little bit overbearing. It's kind of like, it's sort of like what happens at the old center. You've got a sign, crosswalk coming, then you got a sign for the crosswalk, then you got one from the other direction, then the one across the street. It's a little much.
You're gonna like the next agenda item then.
And I know, I'm getting there.
But living in that area, living in the old center area, at first, when I first saw that, I was like, yeah, it was way overkill. But now you don't even see them anymore. You
But
just don't
that's
even
my
see them.
second point. When you have so many, it kind of loses its impact because it's all a blur. But I know that's probably a requirement from the state, but I didn't know if there was any way we could thin some of that out a little. It's a little, from what used to be just kind of this sweet little neighborhood, there's just so many signs. And I'm hearing from some of the neighbors, it's like, and some of them are very bright in color, too.
If you can give us some time to let the traffic sort of figure out where it's going and understand some of the things that we need to deal with, we will certainly take a look at that. If you give us just
That
a
would
little
be-
bit of time.
But just as
That's
a
what I
point
plan on doing.
in the interim, and I've already talked to the town manager about this, any signs that go up in a residence, or frankly, even in a business, they really should be somewhat on the property lines and not like right in front of somebody's front door, or you've got this wonderful open space, and then you've got this big sign where if they could move it a little bit to the property line, nobody wants a big sign in their entranceway. I mean, now I'm talking like a real estate broker, too. It just doesn't have the curb appeal.
Does that happen?
Oh, yeah.
What?
Oh, yeah.
So just to.
I've already talked to Andrew about this a little bit.
We have to kind of get through this phase.
Okay.
It really wasn't our design, and it was Mass DOT's design. They
Yeah.
built it. Now they have to kind of finish it, and then I've already have some ideas, those big yellow signs. I'm sure everybody knows that, there's plenty of share the road signs down there.
Yeah.
We could probably use them somewhere else.
Well, that would be great.
So we're going to look at those
Okay,
things
thank
as
you.
soon as we
Thank
get
you.
through this. And, there's one we need to change for, somebody's driveway keep turning into instead of Green Street.
I
So,
know. I know,
It's a dead end.
so we're going to take care of a couple of
That's
those things.
That's
Okay,
a
that makes-
lovely
that
neighbor
makes
down the
sense.
street, and it is a concern. But what you have done with some of the greenery, actually,
Looks great.
it does look
It's
good.
amazing that grew like that in a drought. There was some water, but it was amazing down there.
Yeah.
How quick that came up. Yeah, it looks good.
The curbing is great, though. That's one thing everyone's envious of, is that curbing. Everybody wants that, and I'm like, nope, sorry, that one's just not in the budget, but,
Yep. Okay.
yeah. Okay.
Okay, so are we okay with, do we need any further explanation on the exclusions here, on the truck exclusion, or? Okay, are we ready for a motion?
Move that the Board of Selectmen approve the truck exclusion permit application for Green Street as presented.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
I'm going to abstain just because I'm
A neighbor?
a neighbor, but I would have voted because if I had to.
Okay, so it's 3-0 and 1 abstention. Okay, thank you, Bruce, for all your input tonight. It's a busy night for you. Oh, you're not, that's true, you're not.
Doing a joint venture on stop signs.
Right, okay. And we have the chief here with us tonight for this one, too. So, request of the North Andover Police Department for stop signs on Parker Street at Green Street, Brad Street at Green Street, West Bradstreet at Green Street, Woodbridge at Green Street, and West Woodbridge at Green Street. Okay. Chief, how are you tonight?
Good, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Just with any sort of construction like we've done here, the manual uniform traffic control devices gives outlines as to when you need stop signs, traffic flow being heavy from one street and light in another, a high rate of accidents, and in instances where you have streets that are joining where it's difficult to see who has the right of way. So rather than wait for the accidents to happen, rather than wait for the traffic flow to start picking up, we're going to get out in front of this and just put some signs up to dictate to the motorists who has the right of way and who doesn't. That's the bottom line. We just take a preemptive strike and make it safe. Again, safe routes to school, that's what we want to do.
So the stop sign at Green Street, is that mandated by the state?
The one that's,
Already up, it hasn't been approved.
that was, is that?
No, it's not, no, it's as we watched the project and saw how it was gonna work, we realized we needed to pull in there, so that's our recommendation.
It's already up though, right? So we have to approve leaving it up.
I'm sorry,
We
what?
have to approve leaving it up.
It's already been installed.
No. There isn't one coming down Parker at Green. There isn't one there. That's what we're approving. The other one at Green and Green, that's approved by the state. That's part of
Okay,
it.
that's all I want to know, okay?
Yep. Yeah, there's some other ones there too, but those are all approved as a project, not this one.
Okay, and can you remind us how those are implemented? So they go up and there's a flag or something that for the first few months or something when you first put them up? And
Yeah, much like the three-way stop sign we did,
Yeah.
we'll flag them and give adequate warning, right?
Yep, absolutely.
I have to say, I'm in the neighborhood, and the stop signs, I mean, it's like, there's one that's coming from a dead-end street, and I can assure you that all those neighbors know to stop. They've been stopping there for years. Same with West Brad Street, same thing. The neighbors all stop. When you go over to Woodbridge and West Woodbridge, which one is another dead-end street, you have one over on Poplar, and one person lives there. It's just too many signs. That was probably the state. Is that what you were going to say?
Well, the other thing is, because there's a crosswalk there, that the
Okay.
MUTCD.
All right, that's fair enough, fair enough.
Yeah, it is.
It's overkill. It's a lovely little neighborhood. People stop. It doesn't seem to be a problem. And again, I'm hearing from the neighbors, and people are not happy. It cityfies our neighborhood, and that's not the look we want. And people stop. They know to stop.
Again, this is for the motorists that aren't familiar with the area, especially at nighttime. It's for the motorists who are, if there ever is an accident, it's kind of gives us a point of saying who's at fault. And
But that's, Chief, that's fine. But when you look at all the streets that are coming up Mass Ave, there's quite a few that don't have stop signs that are coming into Mass Ave, coming in from Waverly, around the Thompson School, the little streets, they don't have stop signs. It's too many signs.
Can I ask, actually, so now that this memo has been submitted to us, whether we approve it or not, let's say if we don't approve this, and there is an accident where someone's leaving West Woodbridge or Woodbridge onto Green, does this actually, in turn,
What's
make
the
us
accident history?
liable?
What's the accident history?
No.
whereabouts?
On all those 5 streets?
They're not many, to be honest with you. There was one right in front of your place about 5,
That's
6
true.
years ago.
The only one that I feel as though I could support, and even that I'm kind of iffy on, is Tavern, because people use it as a cut-through, but then they take the right.
Right.
They're not going straight through to Brad Street Road. The one on the corner of Tavern and West Brad Street, people do use that as a cut-through, and about 5 years ago, there was an accident there.
Right, and again, we're trying not to wait for the accidents to happen. We're trying to get out in front of it, because having the safe routes to school, from my understanding, is this is going to be a heavily traveled pedestrian thoroughfare, right?
That's what I was going to add. You really don't know how the pattern's going to go through there now. There could be a lot of people
But
trying
then
to
we should-
avoid the Green Street, so.
But then
again,
I think we should wait and see. We've now taken the trucks off. We've got a whole, again, it has never been a problem, and I'll tell you, the neighbors are not really very happy about it. So I would ask that we kind of wait and see how things go. I would argue that maybe the one that is coming from, I get my Brad Streets, I only live there. When you go by way of Tavern, it's near the park. That one makes a little sense because some people, but they aren't going the other way. Everybody stops. It's just a short street. And if you're going to do this, I think, are we going to do it throughout the whole town every time you, like I said, coming from Waverly Road, right near the Thompson School, there's no stop signs on those little streets. And there's some cut-throughs there. Mass Ave, like Sylvan. I mean, I could just list all of them that don't have it. And they're all around schools.
I think the ones in Thompson, though, like the Dana Street, Dewey Street.
I don't believe they all
Howard
have
Street.
it. They don't. I drove by because I
Okay.
was curious.
Are there-
Some do, some
Are
don't.
there crosswalks at where Woodbridge? Was that part of the
No.
project? Did we put crosswalks at all in those streets?
There's no crosswalks there. There's none even around St. Michael's. There's a lot of activity as you go, and Church Street, I don't believe has one. I don't think Merrimack Street has one. On your side, there is one. But Third Street does. Yeah, Third Street does. I would really ask the board to, I think again, it's overkill.
Well, I would think, I mean, I'm just looking at the map here, and where some of the streets seem to be a natural flow-through with that cross Green Street, like West Woodbridge to Woodbridge, it would seem to make sense there, because then there's no clear direction on who's got the right-of-way there, because you could just continue to go right, from Woodbridge to West Woodbridge, thinking that that's
I
the
know
right-of-way.
the two neighbors that are on that, they really, well, one's a dead-end street.
True,
But I know
which-
that there is a resident on West Woodbridge who just maybe a week ago was complaining about the speed, and by coincidence, you put the mobile speed sign there.
Right.
I don't know who did, and, they were thrilled, and I was like, I
Well,
had
that's
no
one way
idea.
to slow it down, too.
Um,
And then Tavern Road over to West Woodbridge, West Brad Street, again, that's
That's the one where you go Tavern to
West Brad Street.
West Brad Street to Brad Street. That's the one that I agree with you. There was an accident there about 5 years ago, that probably could use a stop sign.
Parker Street at Green, Brad Street at Green. But you don't think the West Woodbridge Road to Woodbridge Road, where that seems to be a straight, that flows
No,
through?
people really aren't they aren't cutting through there. They're usually taking a right or a left on Green.
I know you're talking about the neighbors, but one of the things we do keep in mind is the commute to school, is all the people coming into the middle school, especially now with that complex that we're talking about going in 4 years, 5 years.
Well, then we can check that out in 4 or
Okay.
5 years. We've just made some changes there. I think we should just see it frankly, I'm there all the time, and I don't see what you're talking about. I've talked to the neighbors, and they're feeling the same thing. It's overkill. And we don't want a yellow line going down the middle of the road either.
Double yellow line,
Bruce.
right?
But what,
We didn't.
I know.
what's the indicator that, if we need it or not? What's the burden of proof that needs to be shown that whether or not we need it? Or, does it have to be an
You could
accident?
have, no, it's for the same reason that, are we gonna wait for, accidents are accidents, but there isn't a high level of accidents there, other than 5 years ago, there was one coming from Brad Street, off of Tavern to Brad Street, right onto Green.
Right.
But we also have 2 stops there as well, on each end of the 4-way stop, and then you got to stop over by Parker Street now.
It just seems like the only thing missing from this conversation, though, is the lack of accidents. So I don't know what could be, it sounds like we're already getting a strong recommendation from multiple members of the police department, right? You had
This
an
is
actual
recommend, yeah, this is
Officer
from the
Wilson,
safety
you're
officer.
here
Yes, that's
as
correct.
well this evening advocating for it.
We had a stop sign on top of Elm Street that was not recommended by the safety officer. That's up. I guess they changed their policy again.
It was recommended by the police chief
Wasn't, no.
and the DPW director and others, so it's probably not the best in ours.
But, so that's why I'd asked, though, about now that we've identified it, I don't know if this, how in-depth this legal question becomes, but we've identified
I'm not
that-
worried about the legal question, Mr. DeColigiero. The bottom line is that ultimately drivers are responsible. There's been a recommendation made, but whether or not the board takes up the recommendation doesn't change the liability of the community associated with those intersections. I think that's
There hasn't been a history of
No
accidents,
worry.
other than that one 5 years ago. And now we have 2 stop signs. We have no trucks. It's just not a call for it right now. Maybe it's, right, maybe when we get this great park, there'll be a lot more traffic, but there just isn't. And I think if you put an officer there just to sit and watch, they'll find out that everybody stops when they come to Green Street. They stop, believe me.
Neighbors, but again, like if people that aren't familiar with the area may not. I mean, and that's really what it's there to prevent, I guess, right? I mean,
They're not using Woodbridge, they are not using, they do use, and I'm getting my streets mixed up again, the one on the corner of, near the park. That is used as a cut-through. The others are not used as cut-through. Well, it's Tavern
West Brad Street.
Tavern to what, Brad Street to Green. That gets used as, there's no question that gets used as a cut-through, and it's a narrow street. It does. But they don't go straight. They take a right or they take a left.
So we need some kind of a recommendation here then. What do we want to do? Do we want to motion this in one way? How do we want to do this?
I'd like to make, because it seems like the first paragraph identifies an actual, real safety issue, which is the confusion, and I think that anyone who's driven down there, so I see it, I can at least attest to that there is a little bit of confusion at how now Parker Streit veers away from Green Street. So at the very least, it seems like we're discussing, most of this discussion is focused on the second paragraph, so I'd like to at least motion that we approve the recommendation for installing a stop sign at Parker Street and Green Street.
It's already in.
No, that's what he was just identified. So there are Parker Street and Green Street. Well, the sign you're talking about is technically Green and Green there, and that was part of, as Bruce explained, the MassDOT project. But this one is where Parker Street, it almost looks like Parker Street and Green Street are the same street actually now.
I'm confused too. So what, it was a temporary stop sign there?
Yeah, they put a little temporary one in, and that's gone, because the state had to, I don't know but they took it out.
It was part of the construction project.
Yeah.
It wasn't permanently voted by the board.
So until they got the other signs in, they wanted to make sure nobody got going through there. So what was happening is people were coming right through there, then people were coming up and continuing on Green, and there was some.
Yeah, I thought that was already set, like,
No, that is not set, it's not part of the project. You would have to vote it in to be a stop sign.
So, I mean, my input is I'm certainly not comfortable going against the recommendation of the DPW director, the police chief, and the safety officer, where they're recommending these signs. I understand the impact to the neighborhood, but I'm certainly, when you have 3 professional folks that do this for a living and they're recommending this, I'm a little uncomfortable with going against their recommendations for this.
Mr. Chairman, so the motion, though, was for just Parker Street, and then we could continue the discussion where it seems like there's a little bit more disagreement with the other locations. But Parker Street, it sounds like that is currently presenting an actual safety issue that's not consistent with the concerns with the other intersections. And so the motion to approve this stop sign at Parker Street.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the stop sign at Parker Street, Parker and Green. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
that one makes
Okay.
sense. Yeah.
Okay,
thought
so
there was
that's
already one there.
4-0. So we've got, the Parker and Green. So now we've got to discuss what we want to do about the recommendations for unless, well, we take we take no action on Brad Street and Green, West Brad Street and Green, Woodbridge and Green, and West Woodbridge and Green, at Green. We could take, again, that look and wait or look and see approach to those.
Wait for Tracy.
What's that?
Gonna have to wait for Tracy.
Why?
2-2's not gonna make it go.
Okay.
What prompted you to, I mean, I know that you said there weren't any accidents, but what, was it just part of the as we're finishing up that project, that the police department decided to look at those intersections now?
Yeah,
Or was there?
basically, because working with DPW, working with, this project going on at the middle school and trying to take a preemptive strike to really kind of make sure we keep it safe.
So, let's discuss a motion. Either we're going to make a motion or we're not going to make a motion, we'll table them. But we need to close this out somehow. I guess at this point, it seems that a recommendation could be that we bring it back to another meeting when we have a full board here, because it seems like we may not, well, I don't know how the vote would go. I don't know where you're getting 2-2 from, but I'm just assuming.
I live in the same kind of neighborhood. Stump signs aren't needed.
Okay, so can I have a motion then, or take no action?
Mr. Chairman, can we, a motion to table this until our next meeting?
Second.
We have a motion to table the remaining recommendations until our next meeting. Do I have a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So we have one, and then we'll open the discussion up again for the other.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Next is a vote to adopt the energy reduction plan for green community application.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have, as the board knows, and was brought up at town meeting, we've completed the necessary steps or actions to proceed with a full application to the state to get green community status, which is fantastic news. It'll provide the opportunities to get future grant funding for the community. That last step is to accept an energy reduction plan. That plan is in your package for approval. In essence, it talks about the need for the community to endeavor to reduce its energy consumption by 20% by the end of 2019. It should be noted that Department of Energy Resources has recognized the previous work of the community through the ESCO project and allowed us to use the savings in energy from that project, which is approximately 16%, to apply against that 20%. So in essence, the town has to get between now and the end of 2019 and generate additional 4% in energy reduction, so, which is good. The work we did previously, they gave us credit for, and so if this is approved this evening, and I think it also has to go for the school committee later on in the week, we'll move forward with the full grant application. We've received feedback that everything is in order, and we'll be designated as a green community, and make ourselves eligible for future grant opportunities.
All right, great. Any questions? Okay, we have a motion.
Mr. Chairman, move that the Board of Selectmen adopt the energy reduction plan and fulfillment of the Massachusetts Green Communities Grant Program criteria 3.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, 4-0. Okay, next we have consent for the, what are we looking at? North Andover Festival Committee and North Andover Police Association request permission to conduct the annual Santa Parade, well, we're already talking about this, November 26th, less than a month away, 2016, from 11 to 2 p.m., and to limit parking along the parade route.
Second.
Any discussion? The route, I'm assuming, is going to be the same route that we have each year, going down High Street, going down Elm to Elm to...
Main to Elm to Water to Main to...
Thank you. Right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Great parade.
Okay, next we have a donation, accepted donation in the amount of $50 from Karen T. Lang and $680 from the Roberts family to be used to purchase additional exercise equipment for the fire department. A motion?
Just to make it clear, it's the Lisa C. and Mark Roberts family, because we have a lot of Roberts family.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it just said Roberts family in my paper here.
Because my first reaction was it was from the Tim Roberts fundraising things, but
Okay.
so that people know that it's Lisa and Mark Roberts.
Well, of course, we thank them very much for that donation and for the fire department. Do we have a motion?
Move approval?
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Accept donation from North Andover Merchants Association in the amount of $540 to be used for safe training. Anybody from the merchants here? No, but thank you very much again for them.
3 people here,
What?
Merchants Group.
Oh, but nobody can speak to this, unless you can speak to it. I don't,
No, I cannot,
okay.
other than what it says.
I don't know the genesis of that donation.
Neither do I. So do we have a motion?
Move that the Board of Selectmen accept the donation from NAMA in the amount of $540 to be used for the fire department's safe training.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, very good. Request to surplus furniture and equipment, the town manager.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, through the moving process, there's certain furniture we've recognized as being either obsolete or damaged or not necessary. All of that furniture, 100% of that furniture is furniture that ultimately would get disposed of. Some things were broken, some minor things were broken in sort of all the move, and then some other things have been at community development for a period of time. So as you see from the list, it's not super substantial, but as part of our policy, I need approval to surplus that equipment.
Okay, do you have a motion?
If you want-
Yep.
Any of that, like the desk, the hutches, are those broken, or could those be reused and put, say, to Bruce's office or the water treatment office?
Yeah, anything that's identified in that list is damaged in some way or obsolete. The furniture, the particular desk identified, has been around the community for a lot of time, so it really was not in a position where we'd reuse it. In cases where we had some excess equipment, which was in good shape, we've moved that into storage to be used as part of the public works project, as an
Okay,
example.
that's what
And
I
in
was-
all cases, we communicate
Okay.
both with school and town to find out if
To
there's a
see if
need.
someone has use
Yep.
for it, okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, do you have a motion?
Move that the Board of Selectmen approve the request of Town Manager Andrew Mailer to surplus furniture and equipment as per his memorandum dated October 25th, 2016.
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. A vote to appoint members to the Master Plan Selection Committee. Mr. Chairman? Mr. Manager?
So as part of your package, I included a narrative that describes the process, the master planning process. We're in the phase of issuing an RFP, which will happen in the next several weeks. Ultimately, that RFP will be responded to by probably a handful of companies who have experience in this particular area. There's several of them that do this kind of work, and then one of those companies will be selected based upon a RFP selection criteria. As identified in the memo, the master planning process is a responsibility of the planning board by state statute, and that excuse me, that statute also identifies the 9 categories that a master plan must identify and address. And this isn't any change from how the statute has been in the past. It's always in this case. Sometimes there's a misunderstanding of whose responsibility for the master plan. Ultimately, it's the planning board. And in the statute, it says from time to time, the planning board must complete a master plan. So in talking with the chairman of the planning board, he thought it made most sense to form a committee, as it has been done historically in the past. That committee, what I would call citizen experts, people with a background of open space, public buildings, any number of interests that are identified in the statute as the 9 categories in the master planning process. He thought it made sense for 2 members of the planning board and 2 members of the school committee to get together with Erica Foyes, the Director of Community and Economic Development, put out an ad for people to express an interest, as has been done in the past, and then evaluate those folks interested, and make an appointment of a committee that would shepherd the master planning process. I would strongly recommend, from my experience and our own past experiences and experience of other communities, this isn't folks from the existing elected or appointed boards. These are folks with specific backgrounds in the kinds of things we're talking about, because ultimately this board will have to review and adopt the master plan as the planning board will, and all of the representative boards' opinions will be included through a public process. The master planning process is one of the most public processes that a community will follow over a 20-year period. There'll be public meetings where various aspects of the community are invited to share their thoughts and opinions. So it's always best to get a diverse set of opinions, and the best way to do that is to have a diverse committee who represents, again, these sort of what I'd call in-town experts in certain categories or areas. So again, we're talking to the chairman of the planning board. He's completely supportive of the idea of appointing a committee, and really what I'm looking for is support of that process. From there, I'm done, other than putting out an ad that would generate some interest from residents. And then this board would select 2 folks to serve on that screening committee with 2 folks of the planning board and Eric, and pick, I believe, 5 members of a committee that would spend a lot of time, quite frankly, over the next 2 to 3 years, sitting in public meetings and working with a consultant.
Okay. I would suggest that we have a selection committee in place now, and they do a very good job. I would suggest if they're both willing to go forward serving in this capacity, that they stay in that capacity. Of course, it's up to someone to make a motion, and if the two,
Oh, I
whatever.
understand what you're saying. You're saying
the
have
appoint-
people
the
apply
appoint-
and then,
No, the appoint, he's suggesting because we already have the two of us are on an appointment subcommittee.
right.
That you continue on and serve on this appointment subcommittee.
Yeah, that's what I meant, so that we would, whoever, yeah, that's fine.
So we'd be
I
adding,
don't-
so they wouldn't be separate processes. You two folks would work with whoever the planning board appoints as their two folks, and Eric just to
Right,
make it an
right,
odd
but-
number, and you'd scan through who you ultimately believe should serve in the committee, and the five of you would select.
Fine. Yeah, we would make a recommendation, but the five of us would decide whether or not they agree.
Yeah, you'd come up
Similar
with,
to what
we'd
we-
come up with five names. The five of you would come up with five names.
So 2 members of the Board of Selectmen, 2 members of the school committee, and a member
Not
of the
school
planning.
planning board. Two members of the planning board. This is the planning process. Ultimately, the planning board has, and they can do this on their own, right? It's their authority under the statute.
Right.
They've decided that it makes sense to include members of the Board of Selectmen. So it'd be 2 members of the planning board, 2 members of the Selectmen, and Erica
Oh, and
Foy.
Eric Foy, okay, that's what I wanted.
And as a group of 5, interview candidates interested in this role,
Okay.
understanding their personal interest, their background, their willingness to serve in a pretty intense committee over the next couple of years, and make a recommendation of 5 members who will serve on the master planning committee.
Right.
So because this, as you said, it doesn't get done all that often because it's time intensive and it's costly, and so we need probably a pretty good ad describing what this committee
Yeah,
is
well-
to go out to the public.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yep. We'd put it on, we'd use social media, we'd use the website, we'd put out an ad, we'd do it in a very aggressive way to make sure we got the kinds of responses that we'd want to get. Yep. We want a lot of interest. This is an important group. Again, in my experience, getting what I call resident experts, someone who has a background, it'd be ideal in a community, in a master planning process where the regular people involved in government will clearly be attending these meetings and have a voice, to get folks who otherwise don't often get interested but have a specific expertise to bring to the table, because this is really labor-intensive and time-intensive, would be fantastic. And
It's-
that's the goal.
But not to scare people off. Yes, it's labor-intensive, intensive. However, it's a great
Yeah,
opportunity to
fantastic.
direct the community in a direction. But as people, as what we have said in the past, though, this is, it's still a living document. So you have a plan, and it gets tweaked, things change. But it's good to have goals and try to march forward. But it's really an exciting project for people who have that interest.
Absolutely. Yep.
So, tonight, are we appointing all 5 or 4 with Eric, or the planning board is
No,
going to
you don't have an appointing authority. I'm just asking for, I'm outlining what the planning board has agreed we can do as a process. We certainly need I need to identify what you have, that the selectmen members of the selection committee are
Okay, so
these two
that's what
folks.
we're, no. that's-
Beyond that, again, this committee will make a recommendation back. The planning board would have to agree with that, because again, this is by statute a planning board function.
Gotcha.
I know, a lot of people think that's the Board of Selectmen, but it's
It's not.
It's the
Very
planning
clearly in the
board.
statute that it's the
Okay.
planning board.
So we are just nominating 2 members of this board to serve on that selection committee?
Correct.
Right, okay.
Yes.
So, do we have a motion then? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
We're coming into our slow season for appointments now anyways, aren't we, Phil?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if Laura, I think Lori's thrilled about that, though.
Oh, I will, while I'm on the appointment
As
process.
of the end of July,
I
the
will,
end of June.
So a little bit of, I would strongly recommend that the board consider in the future that certain committees be exempt from the subcommittee process. So we can, and I'm not asking for a broad range, but there's certain, just from a time perspective, I can't identify those committees now, but I'm not talking, I think I could probably identify some of those communities, but there are some committees where, from a time perspective, getting them through the knothole rather than just bring them to the whole board, not for CPC, not for, but
Yeah,
there's
the
certain.
main boards.
Yeah, no, but for certain committees,
Money,
I don't.
regulatory, that kind of.
Yeah, I don't want to identify boards and make them seem like they're less relevant, but there are certain boards where when we get people interested, we're really excited, because quite frankly, it can be hard to serve. Having to then try to schedule a subcommittee to do that can be complicated for the person and impede our ability to appoint them. So in some cases, I may, in the future meeting, I'm going to provide you a list of some boards, but I'd like to see the board just add the person to the agenda and have the whole board take it up. So we get, because in some cases, we're having some difficulty trying to pull that off with folks in some committees who have an immediate interest to serve, and they're not regulatory, and they're not financial.
Because those really need to have some
Yeah, those
sort
are
of
different,
interview.
right,
Yeah.
and we agree with that, but, so I'm going to provide you a list of boards that, you guys can choose to do what you want, but I think
No,
ultimately it'll help speed the
No,
process.
I think we've talked about that
Yeah, okay.
anyways in the past.
Let's take that up, then
Yeah, I'll add that to
another
the next-
subsequent
yeah,
meeting, we'll
next-
talk about which
correct.
boards we would want to
I'll throw you a
consider
list
that
and
for.
you add and subtract however you'd like.
Okay, moving along. Now we have to vote to appoint a member of the Board of Registrars, Martha Salisbury, who has served this town and on this board for many, many years, has submitted a letter of resignation, and we obviously thank Martha for all of her years of service and wish her well in the future, but and respectfully accept her resignation because she certainly is a tremendous asset to this community and has been for many, many years, and we thank her for her service and accept that resignation. So we have before us three names that were put forward by the Republican, I guess, Republican Town Committee?
It's Republican Town Committee, yeah.
Right, so we have three names that were before us. I don't know if you want me to read those names, or if we just want to make a nomination for one of those names.
I had one question. Why are we making this so fast? Anybody that comes in that doesn't know what they're doing on election day. I don't know.
I'd like to build on that. So Martha's letter says that she will serve until an appointment is selected. And we are in the middle of an election. We're not looking at an election a week from now. We've had 25% of our voters already cast a ballot. Those ballots haven't been counted, but they've been cast. And in speaking with the other members of this board, they're expecting that Martha would be attending either way. I know that that's a tight-knit group, that they've all served 2 decades, possibly around 2 decades plus. And, I mean, I would rather see this table than have a new person be oriented to the role after the election, especially because I can't speak for every registrar, but at least 2 of them have expressed concern about their ability to fully integrate that person into the process, just because this is, not because of the results, but because of the actual process. This is the single largest, most complex election that our clerk's department has had to oversee.
Now, see, I think there's probably a compromise to that. I mean, if Martha is, willing to work the election, but have the appointee at least be there as an observer, or as we often have volunteers that Joyce will pick and help, so that she would serve in the capacity of registrar, Martha, and then the new person at least, starts to get some training. So I certainly don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, that wasn't in the back of that letter.
I did read it, yeah.
You should probably read the names into the record. If the letter wasn't in the package with the names?
No,
Not her
Oh,
letter.
no, I'm sorry, Martha's letter was not.
Oh, Martha's
She's
letter.
holding Martha's letter.
Yeah, I'm sorry, yeah. Sorry, I misunderstood. My bad.
I mean, I would love if it'd be possible. I know that there was some confusion with the appointment subcommittee on whether or not we'd have the chance to sit with them, and I know that all this just kind of happened within the past 5 days. I'd love the opportunity, or at least to invite those 3 individuals to come and speak to us, because I can say I know one, but I don't know the other 2. And so I don't know that that's actually a fair...
I know 2, but I don't know 1, so I just,
Historically, in the past, that's not how it's been done. It's usually they take the recommendation and it's done.
But they're recommending 3 names.
Yeah,
So I'd like to, I'd love to, and if only one shows up, that at least shows that that person's the one that's interested. But, I mean, right now, we're looking at 3 names. We're being asked to appoint somebody to what I consider a very important position. I'd like that, it'd be great if those people could attend, or at least give us more time to actually speak with them and ask about whether they're interested or not. I know that we were given a list like this about 10 months ago, and a couple of those names were on that list, but, I mean, at that...
And then the appointment was made.
Well, and I think that, it had been communicated that, there was a preference for one, and that she had an especially high interest in the position, and she seemed to be somebody who was willing to take it, given that we're being asked to make this appointment right around, or again, in the middle of an election. I'd wonder, when it comes to those names, I mean, they're notified that they're interested, or do they speak at the meeting that they're interested, or were there other people that?
It was decided at a Republican Town Committee meeting, and, yeah, they've expressed some interest, some more than others.
I mean, I
So
would
your
motion,
point is you'd like to discuss it with them, see, you know, what their level of interest is, and
well, this isn't like serving, with all due respect to this, like the Sustainability Committee, where we kind of try to add as many people who are interested. I mean, this is more similar to the Planning Board or Zoning Board of Appeals, where they have real responsibilities, actually compensated. And so I definitely, this is a position, so anybody listening, they're probably like, why are we talking about Republicans? So we have 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats on this board, and so Martha Salisbury, how long has Martha served?
Quite a long time, as long as I can remember.
Has held one of the Republican
positions. Bringing back one name from the Republican Town Committee, who they
Well,
want.
state law says that they have to recommend
They
3
say we
names,
have
and
to
then we as
recommend.
the
If you don't
appointment.
know all 3, how can you vote without being objective?
Well, that's, we've only been given, and perhaps they've only been given a few days' notice.
Yeah.
If we I would like to move, actually, our motion that we table this until our next meeting and give the opportunity to invite those 3 members to attend.
attend a meeting of the Board of Selectmen or of the selection committee?
Well, it sounds like it's typically the full board, that they don't go before the appointment subcommittee anyways.
Actually, again, it's usually, the names are given, and then there's a motion made, and that's, Donnie can attest to that. That's the way it's been for the longest of time. We've never interviewed them all publicly, whether it be Democrat or Republican. It's just the
Or at least
recommend.
express their interest. As Don said, he knows 2 names and not one. I only know one of the names. I don't know that that's a fair assessment to give. And not that they have to be assessed, but at least just express their interest and say why they'd want to join. I don't mean they have to be grilled, but given that this is an appointment that's happening in the middle of an election.
Well, again, I would certainly motion to have one person and, let Martha finish the election if she is so willing, and at least have the person start to learn about the process.
So they've made the case, though, that they're not in a position to even teach. This is going to be the largest, most complex election. And so I'll say, I don't want to speak on behalf of them, but I did speak several times with 2 of the different registrars who said, we can't imagine even walking a brand-new person through this process.
So, all right, given that, what's the downside of, if Martha Salisbury is willing to serve throughout the election, which is, again, next Tuesday, and then our next meeting is on the 19th, what is the, thank you, 14th, what's the issue what's the downside of asking Mrs. Salisbury to continue for one last election and then have the new appointee start after that election? It seems like Selectman Caldera has a good point. The election is a week away. We're in the midst of early voting right now. We're going to ask somebody to walk in cold in the middle of all that. So it's, of course, up to the board, but do we have a motion?
I move that we table this until our next meeting, scheduled for November 14th. November 14th.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No,
Opposed?
I'm ready to vote. It is the Republican
I
appointment.
would like to have the Republican Committee bring one name forward, because I
I was more than willing to make a motion on one of those names.
But state law says they have to. They have to.
They have to
present 3.
submit 3.
Yeah. So that's that. It wasn't.
But there's one I don't even know. I can't vote on something I don't know. That's,
Or even if nothing says that we can't in the next couple of weeks, just reach out to each of them if they.
Well, I would
feel
suggest that
intimidated
you
by it.
do. So that way we can make a decision. So
Yeah.
I would suggest that, we make some attempt to either bring these folks into the next meeting, or we reach out to them individually and try to get to know them and understand, the positions.
Lori, would it be possible? Do we have contact information for the 3 of them, or just? Should we forward one?
I only have the letter,
We can reach out to
but I can
Mr.
find out
Ganji
from the
and have him
chairman.
provide-
What the best way to contact the 3 are?
Okay, so that was 3-1. Okay, old business, none. New business, none. Public comment? No?
We wore him down.
Okay, town manager report, we have job posting, vacancy log, and ask the manager. Anything tonight?
I did receive a question about the status of the solar project at Osgood. The status of that is we've executed the agreements, the pilot agreement, payment of lumen taxes agreement, and the net meter and credit sales agreement. With that, we've received our first quarterly payment associated with the pilot, which is the amount of $21,570, which represents on an annual basis a little over $85,000, and we're going to be receiving closer to $86,000 on an annual basis for the next 20 years, totaling $1.7 million. And based on the net meter and credit sales agreement, we're hoping to reduce our electric consumption by somewhere in the tune of, in terms of real dollars, north of $3 million over the next 25 years. So it's a good project for us, brings in some additional taxes, gets some additional use of the Osgood site, and so very excited about that.
Okay. And the job log is posted, also out on the town website if anyone is interested in the openings that we have in the town of North Andover. Okay, our next meeting is on November 14th, so I'll hear a motion.
Motion adjourned.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.